Man, that rain sounds amazing. Woo. Gonna sleep good tonight. So it's probably 10 p.m. on a Thursday night. And I am going to take some things off the back of our OM617A. For reference, here is the Mercedes 300 SD Flywheel. So bravo to the forums, because the forums informed me that we have 12 holes here and every other hole aligns with the Mog's flywheel. So we actually, we have bolts that will align here. There just aren't as many on the Mog's flywheel as the 300D's flywheel. Another thing that I'm curious about, how well does this align? Was unsure what would be true and what would be false on the forums. Looks like, as I suspected, it's kind of a mix of true and false. So, do the flywheels from each line up but have a different number of holes? Yes. The flywheels of each, the 300SD, the OM617A, has 12 bolts holding the flywheel on the back of the engine, whereas the Unimog's has 6. The 7th hole there is a little alignment dowel. So you have 6 on the Mog. Now, why not just use the 300 SDs? Well, the Mog's flywheel is significantly smaller in diameter than the OM617A. I don't know if you can tell there, but 617A, good bit larger. Now, the difference in flywheel diameter is important because your flywheel, the teeth on your flywheel, are what the starter spins in order to spin the engine. You can imagine this is bolted to the back of the crankshaft. This spins and gets the pistons actually moving up and down the cylinder. This rotates the crankshaft and gets the whole engine turning, and it's kind of starting to run itself. And then the starter retracts back after that process is finished and the engine's on its own. So this I can't use the wrong diameter flywheel, because then the starter, you can imagine if we use the OM617A starter and it pokes out and tries to spin thinking that it's engaging on a wheel this large, it's going to poke out and spin this wheel, but the wheel is much smaller. It's just going to poke out and spin around by itself and not touch the flywheel, because the flywheel is closer to the center of the circle, if that makes sense. I'd like to give you an idea really quick of what we're looking at here on the Mog side. So this is the engine backing plate from the OM617A. It doesn't really play nice. You see, like even when I line up the bolts on this, on the actual face on this side, the starter stuff is just all out of whack. Whereas the Mog, this is the one that was made for it. So really nice and easy. You got the alignment dowel in that bottom corner, and boom, all the bolt holes are lined up. Starters lined up, that's a big deal. I didn't want to have to cut this or do whatever I had to do with that. So I'm going to try to go with just this plate. I'm going to go punch these holes out to make the alignment dowels bigger on the engine side, and then we'll see how everything bolts together. Another quick demonstration. This is the OM617. Here's the Mog, okay? So I'm going to line up some bolt holes here, the ones that matter. Let's see. There are some bolt holes aligned more or less right there. So these bolt holes are aligned. Look how far off the circle for the starter is. On the OM617, that's just not going to work. So I think this one would be much better because also we're dealing with a smaller flywheel, meaning the starter needs to be closer to the center to reach the teeth of the flywheel. And enough of these bolt up. I think this backing plate is the way to go. If it's not, then we don't need it. And I punched holes in it and now it's not useful anymore. So it's okay. We're going to use this one for now. We're going to put the OM617s aside and we'll go with the Mog for now. Let's punch some holes in the Mogs. Our OM617 starter appears to be too fat. Luckily, we still have a Unimog starter. And of course, that may have a bit of a fitment issue right there on the starter. So looks like we're running just a tad bit into the side of the engine block with the starter. That may be something we have to come up with. Here you can kind of see my problem. So this Mog starter, we're so close to figuring this out. We just need to cover this gap. We need this gap to go away, and this starter appears to be hitting the side of the engine, the block right here. It's kind of just a little bump out. Very unfortunate. It is just the smallest little bump out. But I don't want to take away any engine block. That's insanity. I kind of just want to... I don't want to hurt this plate. At the same time, I'm tempted just to snug these bolts up and let them draw that gap closed and see what happens. I seriously, I would rather hurt the starter than the engine block. We can figure something out with the starter. I can't figure something out if that engine wall, if that block wall is too thin and something blasts a hole in it one day. I can't do anything about that. So I don't think I'm okay with shaving off some engine block. That's a scary thought. Well, I've kind of figured out a little bit. So I think here's the plan so far. We'll take our OM617A starter, Now, look, here are the bolt holes, okay? So these two bolt holes, the thing is that they're threaded, and the threads in them are a different pitch than the threads on the bell housing of the Mog. So what we need to do is, oh, another thing, the clearance here is not enough. You can see we can't fit the bolt in at that angle. It's gonna have to be something that comes from this direction. And like I said, it's a different thread than the one on the Mog side. That's why this bolt goes in on the Mog side, doesn't go in on the starter. So here's what we have to do. Putting all those clues together, we're gonna have to shave down this side of the starter. Remember, I have a spare, don't yell at me. If we shave down this side and then we have enough clearance to get it through, to get in a straight line on the side, we can attach our brackets. That'll ensure that we're staying at that angle. It'll also give us 2 more anchor points. So then we'll go over to our drill press. We'll flip it up this way. Don't yell at me. I'm gonna drill out these threads. I'm gonna drill them flat so that a M12 bolt can slide right through. I can just drop an M12 bolt in. Then I'm gonna either get all thread or chop the head off of a bolt and thread it into the bell housing so that threads are sticking out. I'm gonna be able to attach the starter and the threads will go that way, so that then the threads will come out of this side and we'll run a nut on the back side of this. I'll be right back. We're gonna make this work. As you can see, when there's a custom project like this, there's a bunch of back and forth, figuring things out, changing your plan on the fly. So that's what we're about to do. First, before I shave down anything or anything like that, I'm running out of metric bolts and whatnot, so I'm gonna stock up on my bolt bin over there, and I'll be right back. It's a little dark in this corner because the Mog shadow is towering over us. I've got it backed up where it's almost, I've probably got 3 feet of workspace here behind the Mog. I just got back from my local hardware store and I grabbed one of these Milwaukee ratchets. I've never even used one of these before, but I just keep running into scenarios where I have to use a hand ratchet. God, it takes forever. So this is very cool. I'm always happy to add some Milwaukee stuff. Always happy to add some red to the shed. So cool, ratchet. Check this out. Hypothetically, I think we achieved the goal here. So I can finally get the alignment pins in there. And it is good. The bolts will thread right in. A reminder, all this stuff is coming back off, but just as a proof of concept, this is pretty cool. I want to go over some things to help some fellow enthusiasts out. If you are choosing to do an OM617 swap to a 404 Unimog, but you're worried about it, don't be. Here's what's true. I've read a lot of things back and forth on the forums. It's really frustrating how much faith people have in forums. I think they're useful tools, but there's a lot of wrong stuff on there. So I'm doing it, you can see it. Here's the 617. You use the Unimog engine backing plate that will bolt right up. You just need to drill out holes to make the alignment dowels bigger. There's another alignment dowel back here behind the flywheel. The Unimog starter will be your easiest bet for fitment. You're just gonna need to somehow make it clear the side of the block. I chose to just shave off some of the side of the starter instead of the block. These bolts won't be here, but since you're using the Unimog backing plate, it will bolt right up to the Unimog bell housing when you're to that point. Use the Unimog flywheel and the Unimog clutch assembly. So pretty much OM617, everything from the Mog is gonna mount up to the back of the 617 with some pretty minimal customization. So like I said, modifying the starter a little bit. I think it's probably possible to use the OM617 starter. I'm still gonna stay with that, but you're gonna need to shave the side of the Mog starter, and probably shave a little bit right here, just a tiny bit. The clutch assembly is going to work. Like I said, I'm going to change from this 3-finger style. The puck thing's weird, and everything I read says it's not very good. So I do think it's possible to use that starter, and I'm still kind of set on doing that. I do want to at least give it a few more tries. So other than that, now we're going to be looking at, I mean, not at this moment, I'm not ready to put this in yet, but one more consideration, probably the biggest one of the whole project, is the fitment of this kind of wide. To be an inline engine, when you really bolt everything on, you got a lot going on. So it's kind of wide given all of its accessories, considering this is what the M180 looks like. I didn't take anything off of the M180. It is that narrow. And that's what was supposed to go right here. So the big fat 617 is going to be kind of pushing each side, but that is something else to consider. If you're worried about what bolts up and what fits, don't worry. This is the easiest swap from something that never had an engine. If you're trying to swap some weird engine in here, this is the one to do because it bolts basically right up with some minor customization. It's finally here. This is the factory Unimog clutch setup, 3-finger style, push in the center and it relieves the edges just like a typical diaphragm spring style does. But I just started getting comments and looking into it more about how this is kind of a point of failure on the Unimog. So commenter, whoever you are, I did switch away from the puck style as well. This is a puck style clutch. You can see it's totally roached. That friction material is all but gone. You can see the hot spots on it. There's just nothing left. It is smooth as a baby's butt. And we're going away from that. There's also way more friction material. You look on a normal clutch disc like this, I don't understand how this could be advantageous in any way. I'm sure there's some logic to it, but this has way more friction material, and it seems like this is going to hold up a lot better than this old puck style. So going away from the puck style, we're going to a standard clutch disc with the standard setup diaphragm spring that we're all used to. So classic clutch setup right here, and it's going to fit on the transmission side. So this is truly a Unimog clutch that's going to bolt right up to the back of the engine. So let's go do that right now. Yeah.
Come on.
You just gotta get straight on it. There it is. There we go. You pull back a little. Yep, good. Now skip over here. Get on it. That's it.
No.
Yep.
No.
One more. There. That's what we're doing. Yep. Go for it. I'll turn it like that. So don't get too close to it. We're really close to it. There you go. Yep. Nice.
Is that a bit too much?
It's a little heavy, but like you said, nobody's going to see the starter, you know? So we'll let that dry a little bit, and then we'll paint it one more time. So.
Just do a little section in it.
See? So that's the section that we kind of ground down. Now it's gonna dry, and it's not gonna look super like solid black, but once we give it some time, it'll dry and we can redo it.
Do you want?
What are you doing? On my fluorescent lights. You good? Straight. Straight up.
hello. So we're taking the exhaust out so that we have clearance to drop the engine in and see where it fits up and how everything's gonna look, and if we need to chop or modify anything. So let's get the rest of the exhaust out and pick the 617 up and drop it in the Mog. Wow, that hurt. Cutting wheel exploded in my face. And it's a coolant tube for that weird cylinder thing. If you go back and watch my video dismantling the Unimog, this is a coolant tube that goes up to that little cylinder under the skid plate. Weird little thing. I guess to kind of act as a block heater, you can heat that coolant up, is what some of the comments were saying. So anyway, I don't need this anymore, not using that. Ow. There we go. That's the exhaust completely out. Whoa. We appeared to be lined up. So I'm gonna tighten this down, I'm gonna let the weight down, and so we can close this gap right here. I'm also gonna try to put this in gear and then spin this again just to make sure that we're engaged. I know logically it makes sense that we would be engaged, but we're in gear now. I'm going to lower this, let it be kind of where it's gonna be more or less, and then I'm gonna try to spin it and make sure that everything's engaged like it should be. And now I've got it in high gear, so least mechanical advantage for me. I think I'm running over some stuff, but you get the idea. That's an engaged clutch right there. So, oh, I have it in 4-wheel drive too. That might explain some of that. But that's cool. That's proof of concept. So now we have a lot of stuff to figure out. If you look online, any forums will tell you that an OM617, they sell this kit that everybody references where it turns the engine counterclockwise, however you're looking at it, I guess, this way passenger side so that it clears the driver footwell right here. I'm not doing that. I hate that idea. But I am gonna have to figure out a solution for all this stuff that's gonna be occupying the space where my right leg should be. I think I have a solution. We're not gonna do it this episode, so I won't worry about it right now. But looking at this, I think I have a good idea of what I'm gonna do right here. So that'll be a later episode, but it is something to consider. Also, I really want this vehicle to have air conditioning. This is gonna be a long-term overland vehicle for us. I really want us to be able to bolt on some AC stuff in here. I don't know quite how I'm gonna do that. That's gonna be tricky because this engine bay, if you can call it that, is jam-packed with this big boy in here. So this is absolutely the biggest engine you could possibly fit in here. Now that I'm looking at it, actually, I could get rid of this power steering pump. I'm not using power steering. Ooh, good idea. Good idea, audience. Power steering, I don't feel like it's something that's all that critical to my ability to drive this thing. On the other hand, air conditioning seems to be one that I feel that I'm gonna need. So I do wanna figure out air conditioning if I can, and anything that I can take out from under the hood that can help me with that, I'm gonna do it. Okay, we're all bolted up. There's gonna be a lot of adjustment on the clutch for sure, because I can actually roll the vehicle forward, but the clutch pedal only sort of bites halfway through. Not a huge deal. It's a weird new clutch setup for it, so I'm not surprised by that. I'll have to adjust that little rod over on the driver's side. This is also, I may have mentioned this before in the video, this is a purely mechanical clutch setup, so no hydraulics in this clutch. So we have a few more things to do. We got to put the starter in. I was trying to put the starter in just now, and I kind of realized that if you remember our shaving the side down modification that we did to make this big fat starter fit, it worked initially. I felt good about the fitment of it. Now I can't seem to get it on there. Well, not too much of a surprise here. So I grinded this down, you remember that, and it fit, but I had the engine separate from the bell housing. So I fit it on the engine, it fit it on the bell housing, it fit. But the way that this has to go in when they're together, it has to slide a certain way, and I didn't grind down this lip here, so it has to slide this direction, and this lip is in the way. So if you have all the room in the world, you just place it there, it fits, but got to grind this down so you can actually slide it in the direction that it needs to go when it's in the vehicle. So I guess I will do that now, man. Not a big deal. Let's go see how this fits up. We may have to come back and grind, or maybe coming back to paint. Going this way. Have you ever heard people say that in social media and YouTube, places like that, that the people on the screen are only showing the good parts of their lives and of their activities? They're not showing you the stuff that goes bad. That's not me. I'm going to show you the stuff that goes bad too, and this one's embarrassing. This is the stupidest thing I've ever done on any car project ever. And I have quite a stack of car projects and a fair number of stupid things that I've done. This one definitely takes the cake. So this OM617 and this Unimog transmission, I wanted them to mate together. They did bolt up, and this is the starter for the OM617. Now it's much bigger around than the Unimog starter, so I would have used the Unimog starter for better fitment if I could. But the Unimog was 24 volts. If you don't know, that means that every car you've ever driven is a 12 volt vehicle. It has a 12 volt electrical system. Everything in it runs on 12 volts. So when you get something that has 24 volts, if you try to spin that with just 12 volt power, It's not going to work optimally. Some things can actually get damaged by it, but more likely it's just going to run terribly and not up to the standard where you actually need it to. In the case of a starter motor, it's just going to spin really slow, which is what happened when I connected it to a battery just to double check. So Unimog starter won't work. It's not going to spin this high compression diesel. So I needed to use the starter from the OM617. But it's as big around as a trash can, and I needed it to fit up against the block, and where it's held in the position where the Unimog starter would have been, it's too close to the engine block. It's too fat to fit where the little Unimog starter would have fit. So I began shaving down the side, making it flat, giving it some clearance. You may think I'm insane for that, but it's actually not a big deal. That steel casing around the outside, the cap is aluminum, the outside is steel. It's actually pretty thick. You can get pretty far down in there. But as I ground and ground and ground, it still wouldn't fit. When I fit up the starter with the engine on a tire over there, it fit just fine, fit perfectly. When I fit it without the engine installed on the bell housing, it slid over these all threads that I made perfectly, no problem. But when the engine was mated to the transmission and then I tried to put the starter in, it didn't fit anymore. So I don't think anything shifted or is weird. I really think that it's more of the path that the starter has to take now to fit up to the engine. It can't just be lifted up in there. It has to go this way and then come back. I think that was a problem. Still, to this day, as I'm talking right now, it doesn't fit. I have to keep shaving it down. But me being a genius and seeing something on a forum for a Unimog, to be fair, I saw a post on some forum about Unimogs and the OM617 swap that somebody has had the same exact problem. They said, I'll take some metal off of the side of the block. I saw that. I never saw any negative occurrences on the forum after that, so I assumed that it worked. I was shaving down the starter, still wasn't fitting, so I figured, hey, I can get some clearance shaving down the block. You can probably see where I'm going with this. One of the two places that bump out that keep the starter from sitting flush up against the block of kind of fitting where it's supposed to, those bump outs, I figured those must be nice and thick. So I took a grinder to it to just shave off a little bit. And it was not thick at all. It's not thick. I took off not a terribly large amount of metal, and now we have a hole in the block. I used a grinder to put a hole in my OM617A after installing it in the Unimog fully. So this engine has a hole in the block. Now, luckily, I have put coolant in this engine because I wanted to check to make sure that there were no coolant passages that I've poked through. There aren't. I filled this thing up. I mean, I didn't fill it up. I poured quite a bit in where the thermostat is. Nothing spilled out. This is not a coolant passage for sure. An oil passage is unlikely too. Those are pretty tiny, and you can it's actually too small for a little bitty borescope tip. I have a borescope camera that feeds to my phone, and I can't even fit the borescope in that tiny little hole. So it is very, very small, but it is a hole. I stopped immediately when I saw the little shadow of the hole, and I can't believe I did that. That's the dumbest thing I've ever done on a car. After I did it, I was thinking to myself, if somebody else told me this story, I would say, you're an idiot. And I did that. So all of us have, if you haven't made a mistake that serious and you haven't done enough car projects, but this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. Now, how do you fix it? Well, I am, as you probably have seen, I love to weld. I have a bunch of experience welding, but I'm just a pure wire monkey. I only really do MIG welding. I think that MIG is the best form of welding overall. I think it's just the easiest and the easiest to make strong and pretty at the same time. It doesn't require a ton of talent. Really, anybody can MIG weld. So one type of welding that I've always kind of talked trash about is stick welding. Well, this block is not steel, obviously. It is cast iron, which means that MIG's not going to cut it. We have to go with stick welding if we're going to weld it. I bought some 55% nickel rods, and my OmniPro 220 from Harbor Freight, that is a multi-process machine, so it can stick weld with nickel rod on cast iron. I gave it a few shots, and here's where I actually want to give myself some credit. I still have the original Unimog engine. I put it in the back of my Power Stroke that you can probably see off camera right there, parked in the shop. I brought that engine in here because it is also cast iron, and it is completely worse than useless. So I thought I would get some practice runs on the M180, the gasoline Mercedes engine that we're just going to take to the scrapyard. I did get some practice runs on it. It went fairly well, but taking a look at what we're dealing with right here, I just don't feel comfortable with it. Stick is, it's harder for me to control the arc of that stick and to get it to really lay down gently and not blow through really thin cast iron. If you have welded steel before and you're saying that's easy, I'm telling you, cast iron's a different creature. It's a lot more complicated, and it's something I've never welded cast iron before, and I've tried to steer clear of stick welding if I can, and I've always just opted for MIG welding. So I've done a little bit of stick welding, and welding on that cast iron, I am not impressed or interested in pressing forward with the stick welder. So I am going to go for what I think is honestly a better option anyway. And I know that if you would see this on a car you bought, you would panic and run away from this engine, but I'm going to use JB Weld. And JB Weld actually is not the backyard fix that you may think. Of course, it is kind of a backyard fix, but this stuff is really tough. This is this is not a high pressure area. This is not a coolant passage. It's not an oil passage. This is literally just sealing up a part of the crankcase, which it should be able to do. It's also not a part of the engine that's exposed to super high heat. It's hidden behind the starter. The real challenge is going to be after we seal this thing up, we still have the starter fitment issue. So we're going to have to make sure that that starter is not vibrating up against our epoxy sealant that we put on here. So this is a big, scary part of the build. I bought an entire car for this part, and I may have just ruined the engine for it. So hopefully I didn't just scrap a perfectly good Mercedes, and hopefully I don't have to haul a big piece of cast iron out of here and throw it in the scrapyard and then go get another car. So let's see if we can actually fix this. My thought process is I'm going to continue to shave down this starter. I want the starter to actually fit reliably before I do my epoxy fix, because I want this to fit and not have if you probably didn't see, I didn't record it, but trying to make this starter fit, the guessing and checking, it was just 1,000 reps of me putting this in, not fitting, taking it out, grinding on it, putting it in, back and forth 1,000 times. So to avoid that, because that epoxy is going to feel that rub every time, I'm going to make this clear completely, and then we'll put the epoxy on, because we're going to build up a little bit of thickness just applying this epoxy to the block. This JB Weld should hold. Don't roast me in the comments. I already feel stupid. Okay? So I'm going to make this starter fit. Let's grind this thing down, get it to fit really well, and then we will put our epoxy on and pray that it works. And then, the real downer, the worst part of this, in my opinion, is if this works, if we're completely successful, there's going to be a piece of my mind that when we're in the backwoods of Alaska, I'm going to think, boy, I hope that JB Weld holds on. I'm never going to feel as good about this thing as I do about my Land Cruiser or Defender. And that's unfortunate. But let's see how it goes. If it holds up for 2 more years and I haven't had any problems, maybe I'll feel confident then. So let's see what we can do with this starter and this JB Weld fix on an engine block. Here goes nothing. Have you ever made a mistake that dumb on a car project, that impactful from something that was totally preventable? I bet you have. If you've been around as long as I have, I bet you have. Let me know in the comments. I like hearing stuff like that. Make me feel better. Tell me what dumb stuff you've done, all right? For all of my grinding, all of my efforts, the starter is in. There's a little bit of tweaking to get these. I need a crow's foot to actually get these like 100% tight, but they're pretty good where it is. I made an all thread before. I made a pair of all threads that poked out of the bell housing. You still see one right there. You can see that that's a nut threaded on there, not a bolt going into the bell housing, but all thread coming out. I had 2 all threads on there doing that, but that was part of the problem. I couldn't get the starter to go this way and then come around and go onto those all threads. That was causing some of my fitment issues, and now I feel like an extra moron, because with it like this, now granted I did shave quite a bit off today, Let's see if we'll be able to show. So, with it like this, you can see how the dilemma. This is what I guess is a good time to explain. There's the bell housing. There's the position of the starter for the Unimog. The OM617 starter is bigger around than the Unimog starter. The Unimog starter is 24 volts, so I have to use the OM617. And because it's a big old trash can of a starter, it's right there up against the engine block. You can see the closest to us little ground down spot. That was an effort to get some clearance from between the starter and the block. Obviously, I don't recommend it. Now, I have paper. Here's my registration for the Mog, and we're clear all the way through. The only thing we're catching on is the little bottom lip that's kind of the bottom of the block. So we actually, I know you can't really tell, but we have a good bit of clearance actually. So that's good. Now I have to remove this. I actually damaged the starter a little bit, that aluminum cap. I ground this down quite a lot on the other side. We've actually poked through that now. But I'm less worried about that. I will also JB weld that if I have to. I'll figure out some way to seal that up. Even if this starter explodes at some point, this is a proof of concept thing. I'm not actually worried about this exact starter. So I do want this to work, don't get me wrong, but I'll seal this up. I'll do whatever I have to do. I'm more worried about the block, obviously. So I got to take this off. We're going to put some JB weld on there. We're going to let this cure for a couple days. I'm not going to touch this thing for a couple days after this. But here we go. Let's remove the starter. Let's get that JB weld on there. I think that actually ought to do it right there. So I'm trying to strike a balance between going pretty thin and then also giving this thing the kind of support that it needs, giving it some strength. So hopefully it can bond pretty well with what I've done right there. While I'm at it, I have thinned down this side too. I don't really think it's super necessary, but oh my goddamn towel went. Hopefully that'll do it. Hopefully it's got enough to bond to there. But I really actually think that's going to work. This is probably unnecessary, but I did thin this down a little bit too. In the event that anything ever pokes through here. Now it's got some backup. All right. We'll call that a wrap. So tomorrow, we'll come back. We'll see how it cured. I think we might have solved a problem right there. I think that JB Weld might be the medicine for this one. If you've never messed around with JB Weld, it's some really impressive stuff. It can withstand some pretty high heat. Even the standard JB Weld, not the high temp stuff, but even the standard, it's pretty high heat resistant. It can be really strong. It can be like stronger than welds in some applications. And if you apply it right too, it can be watertight. So JB Weld's really like versatile. It can help you out in a lot of sticky situations. And I think it gets a bad rap because it gets used in a lot of sketchy ways to make some sketchy repairs. And maybe I'm guilty of that. But I'm telling you, it can really save your bacon if you do something dumb. Say you punch a hole in a diesel that you bought for a Unimog, it can really save your bacon. So I just think it's a great way to go when you don't have any other way out. JB Weld's a good thing that can really, really save your day. So I'm really impressed with it. Hopefully this holds up. Now, in this episode, we were able to take that OM617A and throw it in the Mog. The Mog's a turbo diesel now, forever. It'll never be gas. It'll never be propane again. It is a turbo diesel for the rest of its life. And it's fully bolted up to the bell housing. The clutch engages. It has the new diaphragm style clutch with an actual clutch disc instead of that goofy little puck. So the Mog is fully a normal clutch having turbo diesel vehicle. We took my 300 SD, we scrapped it at the scrapyard, and we kept the transmission for my daily driver. And speaking of my daily driver, we are going to switch over to my daily driver for the next episode. So my little 1977 Mercedes 300D, I love it so very much. It's a little naturally aspirated OM617. I drive it every single day, and its paint is totally wrecked. My wife hates it because it's an eyesore, all because of that paint. She says she likes the way it looks, but the paint's a mess, and I agree. The bottom half is baby blue. The top half has no paint on it. So we're going to change that. This weekend, I'm going to change that. I'm going to paint my daily driver black. We're going to paint it like a villain car, and it's going to look excellent. I've kind of outfitted my shop to be sort of a makeshift paint booth. So we can actually do legit painting in here. We have the air for it. We have the ventilation. And we're going to paint my 300D next episode. So we're going to switch away from the Mog. We're going to let this JB Weld cure for a little bit. And we're going to paint my 300D right here where the F250 is sitting. So we got a lot of cool things coming up. In order to test this engine, I'm going to have to drive the Mog with the cab off. You're going to see me driving like a weirdo with no cab going down the road, making sure that JB Weld's going to hold up on the engine. I really want the engine to heat all the way up, to get up to temperature, so we can make sure that thing's really going to hold. So stick around. A lot of cool stuff coming up. There's more than I can list, really. I have a lot of things that I'm going to rattle off. Another big one, I'd like to compare my Defender and Land Cruiser. I've had a couple people want to do a comparison since those vehicles are kind of direct competitors and they're of the same year. They're both 1998 manual turbo diesel four-wheel drive off-road vehicles. People want to know what it's like, the difference between those two, so you'll see that soon. 80 series diesel 5-speed manual triple lock Land Cruiser versus 5-speed manual turbo diesel four-wheel drive Defender. So stick around for that. Thanks for watching The Forge. Be sure to subscribe. That's the main one. It helps me out so much. I'm trying to hit a threshold here. Subscribe for me. You'll see much more of this cool stuff, and I think we're getting to the very best stuff. So be sure to subscribe. Stick with me. And like, comment also. Thank you very much for watching The Forge. I'll see you on the next one where we're going to paint the 300D. Thanks. Bye.